Hello everyone, Don here with the repair updates on the Corsair. Still dealing with that damn bug I picked up a month ago. But here's the rudder, as you can see, and this was my idea of mentioning the plywood. So that'll be glued in there, and then they'll be filled in with styrofoam. And the same thing here. The only problem is I don't have big enough pieces of this plywood left. The holes are in there just to make it a little lighter. This doesn't weigh hardly anything anyway. I mean, a little heavier than this, but this was the front piece from there. And there's the skin that I cut off from it that was damaged, the top side. So it peels off pretty good. You know, it's glued good to the foam, but it still peels off pretty easy. And that's the last piece of this. You know, that was in there like that. So I got to find something to use, plywood, to put another piece in here. I go get some more foam, put it on there, sand her all down, and glue her up. This is kind of broke loose here. I'll be able to mix up some micro balloons and epoxy slurry and fill that all in, squeeze it out. It did part a little bit here on the trailing edge, but that'll all glue back together with the epoxy micro balloons. And then I've got this kind of sanded down to a thin edge, so the patch material will come all the way over here. The first one will come up about an inch, second coating will come down farther into that, and then same thing around here. That's where it stops, there's nothing there. So and this is the tail piece that was cut off of there. Again, I'll do the same thing. I'll make a plywood template of that, glue that on there, foam it on both sides, sand it down, and then repair. The first piece will come down in here and the second piece down in here. And again, this has some separation there that I can backfill with some epoxy and microballoon slurries, same as this side. And there's the microballoons. I got plenty of that. I got plenty of this left over. This is the unidirectional cloth that you need. The fibers for this go this way. So 2 coats, 2 layers, some more, and then I've got some other regular fiberglass cloth in here too. That'll be used for the cowling. So I got plenty of that to patch the cowling and put some cowl flaps on that. So I'm already started on this. The only thing I can't go any farther, I've got just this little bit of epoxy left, and that'll be enough to mix up. It's like 15-minute stuff. That'll be enough to glue this stuff back together here and here and on this side, and glue this plywood in here. Once I get the other pieces made, glue them in. I'm going to go to Lowe's and see what they have for styrofoam. I just happened to throw away all the scraps I had, so that's the extent of the damage there, and the wingtip. This piece, the wing hit the ground on the top, and it bent everything this way. So I'll end up just cutting this out. There's that plywood rib in there that needs a repair, so I'll have to cut that out. But this all be just kind of filled in, and I'll put a piece of foam in there, reshape it. And again, this has been kind of feathered down thin, so then the repair will come across. This is the unidirectional cloth as well, so that's what I did to that today. Alright, so the first thing I did after I got home is I pulled the plugs like I mentioned, so I could spin the engine over by hand to see if I can feel any damage. Everything felt fine. So I put the plugs back in. Well, actually, when they were off, I rolled it over with the starter. Seemed normal, fine. Put the plugs back in, fired it up. It ran fine, revved up. Everything ran perfectly smooth. So I came out here and looked at the propeller flange. It was tracking true, no damage whatsoever. So shut her off, pulled the battery, and then pulled the gearbox. So this is it's a boat damper. It looks just like an automotive clutch, except for it's a triangle base, which you can get car clutches that are like this. But this one's meant for a boat. As you can see, it bolts to the flywheel, and then these springs are the dampening device between that and the gearbox. So no damage to anything there. That's perfect shape. No cracks, nothing. It's beautiful. So then I took the gearbox apart, and that was the hardest thing. You can see I've already stripped the paint off of this thing and run it through my glass bead machine, cleaned her all up. And the hardest thing about getting this apart, there's the the ring gear. I tore it apart, pulled this off, which bolts onto the backing plate, and that's the other half of the planetaries. Those are the planetaries. This is the ring gear, and the input shaft is the what you would call the sun gear, this one. And I wanted to verify that none of these teeth were damaged, because this would be a royal pain to replace. So this all survived fine. These are the roller bearings that were pressed in here, 2 of them, front and back, and then between those bearings is a spacer like that. And then those 3 items are inside here, and then on top of that are thrust needle bearings. This was the only thing I found damaged when I took it apart, and I think it was damaged from me trying to press everything apart. Here's the washer. The washers should look like this without that chips in it. Now it's possible that these chips broke from the impact, but I don't think so. I was trying to press the propeller flange off of this, but these pins, there's 2 pins. I thought it was 1 pin. See, there's a hole on both sides, but the holes don't line up. This hole is closer to this edge. That hole is closer to the flange, so they're not straight through. And in the center of this was an aluminum plug. This thing. That was pressed in the center. So I drove in, this also had a kind of a pre-drilled hole in it that lined up with this. So I drove this pin out with a hammer and a punch, but it only went like 1/8 of an inch and stopped. And I couldn't figure out why. So then I put it in a press and I popped this out, because I thought that pin went all the way through, but it didn't. But when I drove this in, the pin on this side didn't come out. It stayed the same. I was like, well, that tells me it's 2 separate pins, which it was. So I got this in the press and I popped this out. Well, apparently when they built this thing, put that hub on there, they drilled this hole, and then they put in a hardened pin, pressed it in. Then they drilled this hole, but they didn't drill it all the way through. All I could see was this little tiny hole there, and it doesn't line up in the center of this one when you look through it. It's more towards the bottom, and you can't get a punch in there to drive this one out. So this one I was able to come in here with a punch and pop it out, but this one I couldn't. So I had to drill this one out. I drilled it out, you know, several drill bit sizes, and it was hard. It was a harder pin, not hard, super hard. But anyway, by trying to press this out, I didn't have this pin out, and the pin was catching. So I think what happened is the other ring was on here, and those bearings, dang it, 1 second, sorry, where'd it go? On the floor, of course. This one, it busted the whole outer edge off of it, because that bearing gets pressed in, these bearings get pressed in flush here. And as I was trying to press this hub off, that hub was pushing down on this bearing, and it was driving it down into this open area here, this little edge, and it caused all this stuff to snap off, all these pieces. It's that whole outer edge of this one, because it's supposed to be like this. So I think all this damage was from me trying to get it apart, not knowing how this thing was assembled. But once I drilled that out, it finally broke loose, and I was able to pull what was left of it out. And then the front seal, of course, you can't get them out without destroying them. So I found the seal, so I'm going to order that. And then this is the other bearing, and it turns out this one has 2 different thickness shims on it. And you got to go in kind of like this. So this is a thrust bearing for when the gears when the propeller's pulling it this way, this thrust rides in there on that center. And then if you had a different prop and had this set up as a pusher prop, then the load's pushing the shaft that way, and then it will push against this bearing on here. Where'd that other one roll? Probably under my cabinet. But anyway, I found this one. I've got this ordered. It should be here this week. And then I just need to get the new seal on here. And then there's one more seal in here for the rest of this. Those 4 bolts, you can see them 4 bolt heads here. That bolts all the way through to those nuts right there. So I can take those 4 bolts out, and then it's also got some little pins, every other tooth pinned into the casting, which I think they don't come all the way through. So, but I need to pry that off because that seal has to go that way to come out. So you got to unbolt this, take this out. These bolts are threaded into there so they don't go anywhere, and that's what all those bolt holes sit. So in order to finish the project, I got to take this out, clean everything up, pop that seal out, put a fresh one in. This gearbox was purchased like 20 years ago. So them seals are old just from time. I mean, they're still pretty pliable, but they're cheap. So I'll buy a new one, get the size for that, get a new one, and then this will be ready to go back together. The hardest part is, damn it, hardest part's going to be pressing this thing back on and getting them to line up with the holes. And this shaft is hardened. I couldn't drill that with a normal drill, it wouldn't even touch it. But I do have a carbide, about a 3/8 carbide. I'm going to try and poke through that to give me a bigger hole, so if this ever had to come apart in the future, then I can get in here and pop this one out, pop that one out. That's what I was going to look for. Here's the pin I drilled out, and it was hard too. So it was like a grade 8 bolt, and it's 480 thousandths, which is an odd size. It's not a half, 480. So that and this, and I had to pop out a couple of these dowels in order to get access to these pins. So, but anyway, everything I took apart on this was fine, other than this broken piece here, and I think that was only because I was trying to press it out in the press, and that put so much force on there. It was trying to push all these bearings and everything down through and caused it to break. So unavoidable, not knowing how this come apart, because I seriously thought that hole was a pin going all the way through all this, through the loom plug and out. But nope, that wasn't the case. So, but that's what I wanted to do. That's the main reason I wanted to tear it apart, check the teeth on that ring gear. And then there's a pilot bearing in there too, like a flywheel roller bearing for that input shaft to ride in this thing right here. And there's another thrust bearing there. And then there was a shim on here that goes against the clutch disc. And it's right here somewhere. There it is, this one, and that rides in against that. So, but this won't come out of the gearbox until it's parted like that, because this literally goes in this way. Just hit it, but that goes in that way. Ugh, good catch. Don't want to lose the shim. So I got that already coming. The seal, I can probably buy it advance and all that. If not, there's a seal bearing shop in town. I can get that or get it on eBay like I got this bearings. But everything else was fine, so no damage. Some people were saying you should tear the engine apart, check for damage from the sudden stoppage. Well, if you think about it, if this was in the car and you get a new kid learning how to drive a stick, what's the first thing they do when they try to take off? They rev the engine up and they pop the clutch out too fast, the engine stalls. Bang. And that's what this does. This protects that bang. How many times has a kid done that? That's no worse than a propeller striking the ground and stopping the engine as quick. It's the same thing as if you just sidestep the clutch and bang. You know, I used to do 6,000 RPM launches in my Mustang, you know, running 10 5s at, you know, 130 mile an hour, and I'd sidestep that damn clutch at $6,000 at 800 horsepower. And it never bent a crank. So this thing is not going to be damaged. So I'm not even worried about it. All I'm going to do is get that all back together, put it back on, and it's done. Put the starter back in it and go. So, but the exhaust. I mentioned last time about this kind of a burn start here, and I was smelling something hot, which could have been this paint here or back by that other exhaust outlet. Well, turns out it broke. I had welded this bung on before and it busted off all the way around there. So then I welded this big washer on here, this stainless washer, welded on there, welded the bung back in there, put it back together. Now it broke right there on that damn seam of the weld again. So, needless to say, this is not going back in. I'm going to redesign the whole exhaust. I'm going to come down off the engine with 2 separate pipes. They're going to come back here. They'll come off here, come around the back, and there'll be 2 sets of pipes down here, and then they're going to come out through an X pipe. But I have to tie the front cylinders are going to come together and go into one like this, merge into one, and then the back 2 cylinders will come together, merge into one, and then those 2 pipes, if you're looking at them, there'll be one probably one on top of the other. I'm going to put that into an X pipe, a little X pipe, and then that little X pipe is going to exit one out here and one out there. I need an X pipe in order to put this oxygen sensor in. Without this oxygen sensor, it has to read both sides of the motor because it's only a single setup. Some newer cars would have 2, one on each side. But that's why with this muffler on here I was able to put it here and it read fine. So with this being cracked like that, when I pulled these spark plugs, these were fine, this was fine, this one was black, sooty, and it was most likely because of that's an exhaust leak, but it also lets in oxygen when the pulses it in and out. So this plug was rich and the other 3 were fine, so that's more than likely do that. So I need an X pipe in there or a center chamber where the 2 pipes can go in and 2 come back out. Everything's got to mix in one center section for that O2 to read properly. So, and then all these pipe lengths will have to be exactly the same length to keep the balance going. So I can't get another muffler in there unless I redo this, and I don't want to do that. So I'm going to try the straight pipes. The X pipes, I'm going to use 1.5" pipe just like it was. But when it goes into the X pipe, I think I'll make the X pipe out of 2". So it's a little bigger. It'll add volume to it and act like an expansion chamber. And then the pipes going out the bottom of the cowling will also be 2" just to give you room for the gases to expand, and it may give the engine a little deeper tone, but it's going to be loud. It's going to be louder. The X pipes work really good at quieting things down. So that's basically that. Then the last thing is the cowling. That's the physical damage to the top of the cowl. It's hard to see, but this is painted, so this will have to be kind of sanded and stripped, and it's cracked here, cracked right there. There's a bang on here from something on the bottom of the plane. But I do need to cut another door over here to check the water level. So it's a good time to add the second door, and then I'm going to add cowl flaps just to help with getting some of the radiant engine heat out of the cowling. So what will happen is I'll start the cowl flaps about here, and I can actually run them out farther so they come out past here, maybe 1 inch, enough that that it's not overlapping the seam here for the fuel tank. Anytime if I ever pull the tank, I pretty much pull a cowl anyway, but I can make those cowl flaps come clear back to here, and I'm only going to extend them maybe 1 inch, you know, just about 1 inch. And then to let the heat out, I'll probably start the cowl flaps from here down. There won't be any across the top, all the way around underneath, because the Corsairs, I think they went all the way underneath, but they stop about here at 1 o'clock, 11 o'clock. So down here, I will cut material out of here. Give me a good inch all the way around. Here, here. So this will be stay same there, and then all the way around the bottom again. Cut it out. Sorry. Cut it out there. Cut it out here. Cut it out here, and that'll stay there. But there'll be a cowl flap on here, so it'll give me all this room for heat to come out. So that's the idea. And here's that was the top. This is the bottom. So it's cracked again there. This just needs sanded down, cleaned up, and then I'll just add some of that normal cloth, and then I'll do the same, repair it out here and here. The only thing I need to do is buy some white. I don't have any more white paint. I've got the blue repair job there. That would probably been from my air filter bracket.
Dinner's ready.
Alrighty. Now you heard that, folks. Gotta go. Wife insists. So anyway, that's the extent of the damage. Nothing else on the engine I can find damaged. The instrument panel had popped loose from this side, broke, so I'll get to fix that. And then I'm going to literally cut this seat apart I'm going to cut this seat all the way back into here. And then it's all going to come out across here. And I'm going to cut it off behind the floor. And I'm going to rebuild it so it sets on the back of the spar. And this will move back at least 3 inches here. Move the whole seat back, get my head closer to here and away from there. So, and then the canopy. My friend down in Alabama has a canopy for a Corsair he wants to send me, but I'm going to go ahead and try and make it. I did already find the plexiglass where I bought this, so I'm going to go pick up about a little over half a sheet of that, 3/16 inch. This is only 1/8 inch. And then I'll get the plywood from Lowe's to make the actual pattern to blow this up out like a bubble. So I need to order epoxy tonight, so that's coming. So next weekend I can get all this stuff buttoned up, and I'll get some plywood from somewhere to use on that, something light, but it needs to be about 1/8 of an inch thick. This is the foam that came off the front of here, and then that's the piece of skin I cut off that was damaged. Can't get a hold of nothing. This stuff is slippery as snot. So, but surprisingly how easy that stuff peels off. But that would have been like that. So, but now I'm going to have this plywood in there to reinforce it like a spine, make it stronger. The idea is, if it ever did it again and this hits the ground, this won't crush and collapse, which will cause the canopy to hit the ground again and potentially trap you into where you can't get out of it. So will transfer more force down through there, but the idea is keep the canopy off the ground so you can open it and get out of the damn thing. That's where I had trouble, because somebody's out flying right now. This thing has to lift up when it comes back. So. And that was the hard part. If I would have thought about it inside, I could have pushed up on this, but this was setting on the ground. Once I got this back up, then it slides, and it actually slides downhill away from the ground here. So that's how I managed to get out of this thing. Because my friend, he couldn't see me, and he never bothered to come look for me. But again, he's 77 years old and can't see for shit. Other things people were asking, do I need to file an accident report with the FAA? So some people are asking, other people are saying yes, you got to file. You have to file. So another Thomas Aluda or something like that, he said that he looked at it and gave the reference of FAA Reg 49830 ABCD or something like that. So I went and looked at it. He said nothing justifies. Well, there's two different ways to justify an accident or consider an accident or incident, and there's two categories. One is personal injury. Who was injured or what kind of injuries were sustained either from the pilot or passengers. And the main criteria for an accident, the big one is there a fatality? Did somebody die? It doesn't matter if it's a pilot or a passenger. If somebody dies, it's classified accident. Now, if somebody breaks a bone, an arm, a leg, some kind of big bone, you break ribs or something, if you break a bone, it's classified as an accident, excluding fingers, toes, and nose. If you break a finger or a toe or a nose, it's not an accident. If you are hospitalized for more than 48 hours after the accident, it's an accident. If you're sustain any internal organ damage from the accident, that's an accident. So anything else, cuts, scrapes, scratches, it's not an accident. And then now for the airplane. If the airplane has sustained wingtip damage, cowling damage, prop strike, engine out, gear up landings, if the gear is up and you can't get it down, you make a belly landing. You damage the tail or fabric planes, you get holes poked in it, damage wingtips, anything like that, that is considered an incident, not an accident. Even the gear up landings is still only an incident and is not reportable. So that's it. The only thing that's reportable is if the airplane is physically totaled, cannot be reconstructed because of the intensity of the repairs. If the spar was broke Now this one, if you broke the outward spar, you could build that whole new wing section. It really wouldn't. But if there's like that center spar was broke and you had to tear it apart and cut that whole spar out of there, then that's categorized as an accident, not an incident. So all this damage on this plane that I've succumbed to is only classified as an incident. It is not an accident. And if it is an accident, you have 10 days to report it. And then of course they'll come and ask questions. But as far as the FAA regs go, this is an incident. Ground loops, if you want to call this a ground loop, everybody says, oh, it's a ground loop. The definition is any adverse yaw event effect. But when I hear ground loop, I'm thinking loop or spinning around 360. That's a loop. This was just basically a run off the runway and tipped over. So, but either way, it's only an incident. So I get some epoxy coming for next weekend. I'll go to Lowe's, see if I can get some foam. I can get it. It's just a matter, do I have to buy a whole 4x8 sheet of it? When I only need a little piece for there, replace that. I'm going to cut that out, redo that, re-glue it up, foam, and then enough foam to finish that. That's all I need. So I don't need anything big. I'm hoping they have some quarter panels or chunks that I can buy instead of a whole sheet. I can buy a sheet, I just don't need it. I had a whole bunch stacked on that table I just threw away not 2 months ago. And I had enough there that would have done this, fixed it. So, microbloom's good. I got cotton flocks also, which is ground up cotton. I'm going to use that like in these back edges, front edges. It makes a real hard finish when it's cured. You just mix it up with the epoxy and blob it all in there, and sand or smooth, and then fiberglass the outside. And it makes a real tough corner. Same thing can be done here. You can kind of shave off this leading edge, fill it in with that cotton flocks, and when it hardens, it's like concrete. So this has already, like I said, been pretty much sanded down, so it's a smoother transition. This will all get filled in with epoxy with the microblooms, but this is going to be cut out and out to here. And then this plywood's actually a little damaged, so I'll cut that off and put a fresh piece in there, and it'll all be good. You'll never see it when it's finished. So, all right, I think that's going to do her, folks. I just need to find, I looked at the plywood in Lowe's the other day, and it's not plywood. It's more like Luan for flooring. It's got a soft core in it. This is, this is like 5-ply, 6-ply material here, actual aircraft marine grade plywood. But nobody around here sells stuff like that, so it doesn't have to be. It's just it's a lot stronger, and it don't weigh much. But that's the spine now. So this spar literally saved this thing, but it drove it 4 inches into the ground. But that held up better than the fin. So, all right, I'm gonna go in and have dinner, and I'll get this thing uploaded to my computer tonight and get it on there so you guys can see how I'm doing. I gotta go pick up some material tomorrow and get other things coming, and then by next weekend I'll be back at it. Meanwhile, the weather here has been absolutely flawless, perfect flying weather all weekend. Next 2 days going to be just like this, absolutely perfect. It's supposed to be 74 tomorrow and like 76, 78 on Tuesday. So, all right, everybody, that's going to do it for now. And as always, as far as the GoFundMe, I see some people have already donated, and if you're one of those people, thank you very much. It's well appreciated. My niece has set that up, and somebody just commented today like, GoFundMes aren't for rich boys for their toys. And it's like, well, if you consider me rich, then everybody in the United States is rich. I can tell you that. For me to raise, the $1,000 to change that prop probably take me better than 3 months just to do it. So that may be the last thing to go on this airplane. This stuff is cheap. The prop is expensive. So, I mean, just the blades, I have to replace all 3 because they don't make that blade anymore. So the new blades are $310, so there's $1,000 just to get 3 blades, or $1,300 to buy you a whole new prop. And they said they'd give me $150 for my old hub if I turn that in and buy a new one. But it's still $1,100 prop. So that's the biggest hurt. And then the other modifications is just stuff I wanted to do anyway. So I may or may not do the lighting thing. Again, that's probably going to be another $300 to $500 for the lights that I'd want to put on there and on the tail and the landing light, taxi lights. But it's stuff I eventually want to do over time. And now I got the time, so the canopy, I can make that. But all right, that's going to do it, folks. Again, feel free to leave comments, questions, concerns, and I'll answer them as they come in. And so for now, I'll be back next weekend with a follow-up, and by then I should have all this stuff already glassed up, ready to finish, prime, paint, and whatever. Just depends on how nice the weather is. So, okay, everyone, I will see you on the next one. So for now, this is Dino Done out.